Let's high-five the sky and bring this event to an end. When I kicked off Yu-Gi-Oh! Month, I went over how the original series wasn't as good as we thought it was with Yu-Gi-Overhated. With that considered, I felt it would be appropriate to end off by talking about a series that's on the opposite end of the spectrum with this video, Yu-Gi-Overhated. If you have no idea which series I'm talking about, then you're either new to this franchise or didn't look at the thumbnail. Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal has gained a reputation as the black sheep. While 5Ds was the butt of numerous jokes about card games on motorcycles, it was still a well-liked series, but Zexal was the point where a lot of fans jumped ship. And the sad thing is that half the people that claim Zexal is the worst series haven't even watched the damn thing past the first season. It's a shame too, because I find Zexal to be not just good, but one of the best entries in the franchise. And my subscriber count just went down. For the people that haven't rage quit yet, bear with me as I go over my perspective on Zexal and why I feel it gets a lot less credit than it truly deserves. And since we're talking about this one series, I'll be referring to the characters by their Japanese names since that was the version I watched. Also, we're going to be talking about some major plot details, so spoilers. So let's start off with the main character, Yuma. I've already gone over the bulk of my thoughts on him in last week's video, but there's one point that I chose to omit and save for today. I had said that Yuma was a protagonist the franchise needed because we haven't had an inexperienced lead character before. But it's not just a change in formula that was beneficial. See, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community can be very hyper-competitive and in some cases aggressive, at least when it comes to the TCG. Out of all the card game communities I've been a part of, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is hands down the one that gets the most heated, and it was at a new peak once the Zexal era came around. That can be very off-putting to newcomers and younger players, and if I didn't have one of my best friends guiding me and showing me who to avoid, I would have been turned off by the community. And this is what I mean when I say that we needed a character like Yuma. In a fan base where it's so difficult for newcomers to break in and build a healthy community of friends, Zexal was a series that said, hey, here's a kid that's just like you. He's new to the game, he's still learning, and he makes mistakes, but he doesn't give up. He'll get better, and so will you if you keep trying. In the original draft of my protagonist video, I had written that Yuya was the most passionate protagonist, but after giving it more thought, I decided to scrap that, because I think Yuma is more deserving of that title. He puts passion in even the most mundane of things, and even when he sucked at dueling, he never let that get him down, and these are all qualities shared by my favorite character in Duel Monsters, Joey Wheeler.
But Yuma's relationship with Astral is a ripoff. They're copying Yugi and Atem. None of the other protagonists have a spirit following them around like that.
Kevin, every protagonist had some kind of companion. Yugi had Atem, Jaden had Professor Banner and eventually Yubel, Yuya had Yuto, and Yusaku has Ignis. The only exception to this was Yusei. Now where was I? Oh yeah. While I will admit that there are quite a few throwaway characters, especially in the first season, Zexal slowly but surely rounds out its cast with memorable characters, and it doesn't toss the best characters at you all at once. Each story arc introduces a few standout characters and fleshes them out accordingly. With the first arc we got Yuma, Astral, Kaito, and Shark. In the Duel Carnival we got Tron and his sons, and so on and so forth. By the time we get to the last third of the series, Zexal had a strong, well-defined cast of characters, with the throwaways either being pushed to the margin or weeded out completely. Which is good because once we get there, the body count skyrockets, and character deaths are way more meaningful when you know, actually give a damn about the characters. Hell, even the villains leave a mark when they die. Aside from Dr. Faker, Mr. Heartland, and Don Thousand, Zexal has had some of my favorite antagonists, especially the Barian Emperors, and it's the first series where I actually felt bad when one of the antagonists died.
Nash, Yuma, Astral. あとは頼んだぞ。ミサエル。
As for tone, there's no arguing that Zexal skewed towards a younger demographic, but while some may see it as a weakness, I see it as a strength. The goal we get at the beginning of the series is very straightforward, to collect all the number cards. With that kind of premise, Zexal started off with a Monster of the Week format, but like the introductory arc of GX, the series benefited from this. The earlier Yu-Gi-Oh series start off by throwing you right into the middle of a conflict at the beginning of the show, especially Dual Monsters and 5Ds. It's a great way to ramp up the action from the word go, but the drawback is that because it's so early in the series, the viewers hadn't grown an attachment to the characters yet. With the approach that Zexal took, it gave us the chance to get to know the characters and environment a little more, so by the time we got to the World Duel Carnival, we have at least some investment in the various characters and goals. Shark's encounter with 4 wouldn't have as much impact for me if he hadn't already grown on me as a character in the previous arc. I wouldn't have been as invested, and their final confrontation wouldn't have been as satisfying. As far as story goes, Zexal is one of the most even when it comes to its plot structure, as there's always a consistent rise in tension and stakes as the show went on. It's a series where every story arc led directly into the next one. Dual Monsters was riddled with filler arcs, some of which lasted half a season or more. Each season of GX felt like its own self-contained story, save for season 4, and while 5Ds had more flow to it, the time skip between the Dark Signers and WRGP made the first 2 arcs seem a bit removed from the rest. Zexal has natural transitions in tone throughout its run. From beginning to end, there's always something that gradually ups the stakes, and when I reach the final arc and look back to the first season from that point, it becomes apparent how much the series had developed, but because that development was done bit by bit instead of suddenly tossing you into the deep end, looking at UGX, it's something I can appreciate. Now I will say that a genuine flaw the series has is how the events affect Yuma in the end. While he does grow and change, especially as a duelist, the ending kinda muddies up the conclusion of his character arc. It gives him a crucial decision to make, but then he's given a solution where he didn't have to make that decision. It's reminiscent of Avatar: The Last Airbender, where Aang is trying to decide whether or not he should kill the Fire Lord, and right when he finally makes his decision, he's suddenly given a new technique that takes away the weight of the dilemma. It's a flaw that does hold Zexal back from being my all-time favorite Yu-Gi-Oh series, especially since it really plays up the anguish of its characters. When I think about it, Zexal really puts the cast through the ringer, mentally and emotionally. All the series have done this to some extent, but what makes Zexal stand out for me is that this treatment extends beyond the main characters, like 5Ds. And on top of that, there's the fact that many of these characters are pretty young. These are middle schoolers witnessing their friends being murdered and their city being destroyed. This is some Digimon Tamers level trauma, and it leads to some dark imagery and music, which leads to my final point on the series, art direction. I chose to save this part for last since it's really the icing on the cake and doesn't hold as much weight as the more meaty parts of the series like the story and characters. And in the spirit of the show, I wanted to end on a fun note. Zexal has a style of exaggeration and extremes that I really appreciate. When characters move, they move with purpose, and when they express emotion, the camera angles and shots play up their features to emphasize the intensity of the moment. It's why I enjoyed Joey and Merrick's duel more than any other duel in the Battle City finals. It's like they took the exaggerated animations of Merrick and Joey's faces and applied it to their entire bodies. And don't even get me started on the music. Zexal's soundtrack has something for every mood, and the consistent horn motif helps to make the epic moments even more so. Not to mention that the show has some of my favorite Japanese openings in Yu-Gi-Oh history. If I ever made a list of my favorites, no promises, almost half the entries would have been from Zexal. It's a series that reminded me of why I enjoyed Yu-Gi-Oh in the first place. It takes me back to those moments of being a kid and looking forward to whatever exciting adventure the characters would get into. Zexal was able to have fun with itself while also being emotionally resonant. And while others may see this as the series where Yu-Gi-Oh lost its mojo, I will always remember it fondly. And I hope that this video helped to explain why, and maybe even encouraged you to look at it in a way that maybe you didn't consider before. And that brings us to the end of Yu-Gi-Oh month. I really appreciate the support that you guys have been giving to these videos. Whenever I do non-pony content, it's always a gamble because a lot of viewers just come for their horse fix and not much else. And seeing that these videos not only get healthy view counts, but also a fair amount of engagement in the comments really makes my day. And I'm looking forward to tackling more subjects that don't primarily rely on MLP in the future. So what do you think of Zexal? Do you think it gets too much hate, or do you think it's deserved? Swarm that comment section below or bug me on social media, and consider supporting me through Patreon or PayPal art commissions. Until next time, keep it sketchy, folks.